When is that going? We'll just make sure you're muted, and then we'll go, hello YouTube, Slaan here. It's been a while. Well, it hasn't actually been a while. I've been streaming quite a bit on Twitch these days, trying to keep all the building that I'm doing kind of in the public view this time, instead of just dropping a video randomly once every few weeks, just with hundreds and hundreds of hours of new content on, with no explanation of how it was done or what you can do with it. So now Alpha 20 is kind of on the horizon. The main dev streams are finished. There's a link in the description to Prime's Twitch channel, so if you haven't caught any of the streams and you want to know why I'm so excited and what all the hype's about, I strongly suggest you watch all 6 of the episodes. The first episode, I think, was the POI one, which was really interesting from a prefabber's point of view. But I'll be honest, even the stuff like the modelling and animation and things that generally never really interested us, I've never dabbled in those aspects of modern 7 days before, they were really good. And it was really nice to see a lot of the development team as well, especially for the Q&A at the end. You know, you really get the impression that these guys like doing what they're doing. And I'm pretty sure someone mentioned a fucking zombie squirrel at some point as well. So this is just a little catch up for all the YouTube followers, because like I say, I haven't really abandoned yous, but a lot of the live sessions now are all on Twitch. So the link to my channel is in the description if you want to hop over and give us a follow on there and tune in when I'm live, usually between 6 GMT and midnight GMT-ish. I don't have a set schedule, but I'm generally on during the week of like the late evening and sometimes on a Saturday or Sunday. As I get more to do, and once 20 actually drops and we've got it to play around with, I would expect this to be live a hell of a lot more. But I will be keeping up the YouTube videos. These are just going to be little updates, like periodically throughout the project as it develops, because as I've announced in the last video, we're starting again, and since that point, after watching episode 6 of the dev streams, which was mainly the live random gen, city tile system, ports and prefabs and stuff like that, massively interesting for someone like me, by a long shot the best video. It was interesting seeing Kinaju, the main man himself, on camera and talking about these systems that he's made, and I must say the U-turn back to this city tile system, that's, I don't know, it couldn't be more different to what we have in Alpha 12, and at the same time it kind of has its roots there, or feels like it's the natural progression from the old grid sort of system. So very exciting times to be world building, even more exciting times for people like me who are making the mini fabs and the little parts and pieces and decorations, because we now have a system to bring those in. So a little disclaimer before we go any further: everything that I'm going to talk about is based entirely on my interpretation of what I've seen in these dev streams. There's a little bit of info on the plot sizes of the new sort of spawn system for getting the prefabs on the tiles on the combo pack Discord, but again, all the sizes that they've mentioned, I believe, were actually mentioned on the stream. So there is a little bit of guessing and assumptions, but they were quite free with dishing the dirt on the ins and outs of the systems. I think the main thing was they just didn't want to show too much of it off, you know, because if they've got like in excess of 150 plus prefabs and God knows how many tiles, so there's content wise an insane amount of stuff about to drop on my laps basically. So for me it was, right, we need to assess how can I take the best parts of Slaanhatten, the things that people found more popular, and it basically used to be the things that you would never see in the game. So the bridges is my number one favourite thing, in the dense sort of city feel, which is kind of going to be captured in this new city tile system. We had things like the open sewer, interconnecting subsystems that were sometimes hundreds of metres in length or size. So they're bringing all this in, and it kind of opens the doors for it to just totally reassess how a project on the scale of Slaanhatten, it's always been this big city. I think at Alpha 15 it was exactly 1.6 kilometres by 1.6 kilometres, 13 by 13 of my old city tile sizes. So I'm ready for Alpha 20 and just to start fucking making some outrageously dense, crazy things. And to get myself into the habit for how it's going to work, I've spent a bit of time off stream just going through scratching ideas on my pad, looking at some of my old project grid maps and how did I lay the things out sitting next to each other, because a lot of things that I do aren't going to be perfectly suited for random gen. I still haven't fathomed out like how you would incorporate the bridges, and I think with the stamp system and the part system further down the line, I think people are going to start really messing around and pushing the boundaries a bit, but initially I don't see how it's really going to work. But the beautiful thing is for someone like me, where Slaanhatten used to get released as this big massive chunk of space where only a part of it was filled out with buildings and content, and then they would release a new alpha, a whole bunch of block IDs would change. I'd spend 2 months trying to bring the old bit up to date while still adding some new stuff, so it did kind of expand over time, but it was empty and filling up, whereas this new city tile system means we're essentially going to build backwards. So I'm kind of planning a map now that I'm going to bring it all up. We're going to see some of Slaan's amazing Paint.net skills. It's ambitious, shall we say, and keep an open mind. Just because the grid covers the whole map doesn't mean to say that we have to keep it that dense. There's a lot of room and a lot of wiggle area for adding hills and adjusting the height map and stuff like that, but at the minute it's at its basic point. I'm back at Slaanhatten 1.0 square one, where at the very least I can calculate from looking at this map that I'm about to show you any block or any point. So if I have to draw a road that specifically needs to join with a prefab, I can look at the Paint.net and just know exactly where that road needs to be. And that's a very, very big deal, and something I tripped up on with Slaanhatten, where there was this trial and error thing going on, or trying to work out the pixels versus the coordinates, and if I draw that here, where is it actually going to be, and if it needs to be a set amount of blocks in width, and then it was an arse. So my advice is, if you're watching this and you want to build yourself a big ass map, do your prep. Plan it out in your head and just have a plan. You know, I'm not saying that this is the way to do it or the best way to do it. This is my way of doing it, and I've been building in this style for literally 5 years now. You go back to my first YouTube videos and all I've done is just build upon my way of doing things, for better or for worse. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done a lot of things that now aren't possible because systems were removed, and I've had to adjust. I've already got a library of 500 plus prefabs all ready to be adjusted and set into this new part system and used for decoration. You know, that was a fucking genius idea. I'm so glad that a lot of the effort that I've put into these things over the years just hasn't really been wasted, because there has been a bit of a grey area for quite a while now of, like, be realistic, it's getting more and more difficult to bring something like this into the game. And you know, is there a little subtle hint somewhere along the lines of just fucking, you know, your idea's shit? And it's like, no, I really, really want this to work. I feel like it's a good idea. I think it's going to be, once it's iterated on a little bit and we get our hands dirty with 20 itself, I think this is the way forward for custom map making. And we're going to, like I was just mentioned, we're going to be able to build backwards. We're going to have a full map of vanilla content that we're going to gradually replace and upgrade and update, modify over time. So if we're, rather than you just staring at the main menu, I'm going to switch over to my side screen, which I've got ready just here. So Paint.net, you download it for free. This is where I modify my Splat 3. I do all of my concept work in here as well. Height maps I'll do in here. You can't do your biomes. You have to do your biomes in... Hold on, let us have a look. I've got it down here somewhere. come on, what you called? Is it Crater? Yeah, so Captain Crunch has a really good video on YouTube that I go back to it every single time. If you're fucking around with the biomes, go and watch his video. I should probably put a link to that in the description. I will do that if I remember. If I don't, Captain Crunch, I'm sorry, but Google and YouTube should be able to pick you up when they search for your name. It is a really good video, and it covers everything on doing the biomes itself. So you'll never really see, you might see a layer of well, you're always going to see one because I'm going to show the old project map. But this is, how does that look? Quite zoomed out. So this started off as a height map, which I then brought into nitrogen, disabled all the prefabs, all the mini lakes and shit like that, disabled all the hills and terrain, and basically just got it to generate the map. And then I've brought the terrain up to a height that I'm happy with, trimmed the rivers down to a size that I'm happy with, mainly because we're going to need to know the ground layer, and that's generally going to set the limits for how deep we go or how high we build or whatever. So at the beginning it's nice to have all that in mind. Now if I bring this one over, this is generally me work in progress file. So what we've got is the height map itself, we've got the biomes layer, which is semi-transparent so we can see where they go. Obviously the splat 3 and layer 4. So layer 4 is where I've just drew on the map. So if I zoom this in, we'll get a closer look. And this is just me toying with ideas, and I think it's supposed to be like dock style prefabs. And it lets you place and build things and tinker around in a space that you know is represented accurately in game. And this is really important if you're going to be dicking around with the splat 3 and the height map, and you're gonna need to scoop terrain out in a particular spot for anything you build lower than the ground level, so that you don't fuck up the prefabs in the distant terrain, which we'll look at with the sewers and stuff. But generally I work a lot out of paint.net. It's well worth oh god, I didn't want to do that. It's well worth having a look and getting a bit familiar with. I'm not amazing at height maps, but everything was done by hand, bit of practice, a bit of copy and paste. There's sites like Terrain Party and stuff where you can just make height maps of pretty much anything, bring them in, tinker with them. So someone with better Photoshop skills or better drawing skills or just knowledge of the program would be able to do a much more better job. But the point I like to make is an absolute amateur can still make something that suits the purpose and looks just fine. You know, it's not like it looks bad, you could just make it look better. So to go back to this one, I generated the map in nitrogen, and the reason I do that is, one, nitrogen lets you feed in a PNG image and it'll create the raw file that the game needs. At one point you could do that in the game. I don't know if that works now. It might, I don't know. I just do it in nitrogen because we also get this lovely little preview at the end. And my initial sort of thought was, if we're going to build these cities out of the 150 by 150 tiles, we might hit points where, you know, I've got a hub over here and a hub over here, and they might touch in the middle, and it's going to be critical that these city tiles like line up. There's going to be they mention certain shapes like the T-junction, the corner, the straight through. The tile that would have the piece that's going to join the hub to the natural randomly generated roads. Now I don't think I'm going to have to worry too much about my splat 3, which we'll get into when we look at the highway prefabs. But generally when I started this map, I had an idea for my city in the middle, and you can't see it here, but basically if I zoom in close enough you can see these grey colours are kind of off. And the first thing I'd done was decide, after I'd randomly generated a map, which hubs I wanted to keep. So you've got the vanilla style streets and stuff there, just so that there was some content around the other areas of the map. Deleted all the prefabs and all the roads and stuff for the ones that I didn't want, and then I hand drew in my main sort of wider highway road, and then I put the highway down itself. And we set it up nice where we had the main highway cutting across what was going to be the dense city, and you see that in the screen. I take lots of pictures of that sort of stuff. It's the thumbnail for a few of the videos. I always make a point of flying up and down that street when I was shooting videos in this map because it does look pretty good. But like Kenaju mentions in the stream, we still have this system of grid, which I think I've done a reasonable job in the past with the old Slaanhatten of getting rid of, but things when I was testing not so long ago were getting back to the gritty system, and when they first mentioned these city tiles and it wasn't too clear exactly what they meant, I kind of fell back into the old system of Alpha 12, and I was starting to bother with streets and city blocks and building the squares and how's it going to go together. And you can see, like, I mean, this is quite an old map, but you can see it's the grid is still there, and these are actual roads as well, so it's prefabs in the middle, and it was broken up to a certain extent, but I think it's been nice having them just drop this new system on and going, okay, this is going to be the cool way to do it, and you're like, yeah, okay, I don't mind starting again and learning this system. And for me, it's not really starting a game just because I wasn't sure where to go with Slaanhatten. I started chopping things up, and I'm quite used to the concept of this is going to be the base bit of decoration for the area. I want a building on top of that, and I want these fences. I mean, look at the way that I've done the military base or the military airport. We drew the runways on the Splat 3 and we dropped decorations around them, and that put all the markings on the roads. It put the little barriers next to the runways. All of a sudden we drop a traffic control tower down, a couple of hangars, few fences, and you've got a military base. It's the same sort of concept as what they've done now, except you're going to have the ability to throw these into random gen, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it interacts with things like that. But the reason I'm not too fussed with random gen at the moment is you leave these hubs and the road decorations stop, and those road decorations are absolutely crucial. They're the difference between just seeing this grey blobby thing off into the distance in a road, an actual fucking road. And I still don't know if they've used solid blocks or terrain asphalt with markings placed on top of them. I think it's a painted block, don't know, but they look fucking good. So however they're made, we're going to make them. And just in case it is a block, I started to think, how can I join all of my hubs on a map and still utilise the best of their system, but then bring over the best of mine? So we don't have to have the highway on legs. That was just done for the sake of doing it and presented a whole bunch of problems. I might still use those prefabs. It's entirely possible. That's the beauty of building the way I have been, is we've got all these little bits that are there to be used, extended, made into whatever, and then dropped in on top of, or built into a city tile with that kind of system in mind. So I kind of revisited the idea of doing a highway and thought, I'm going to do everything on 150 tiles. Now there's going to be a few exceptions, like the bridge. The bridge will start and finish on one of these 150 tiles, but the pieces of the bridge are going to still be made to fit the distance that's covered. So there's still a little bit of guesswork for us. But if I zoom right in, initially I decided on the size of the map we were going to go for, and on these edges I've factored in we'll not probably have a radiation zone. It's just going to end in water, and it means we get a bit more space, because on an 8k map with a 1000 meter rad zone, you've only got a 6 kilometer squared playable area, which is kind of Navezgane sort of size. So I'm a little bit conscious of that. I want to keep the playing space as big as possible. So I thought, let's grid the whole fucking map. And it's not a perfect grid. I drew a small grid of these squares that are all 150 by 150 pixels. So they're the correct size, and in terms of scale against the image, which is, you can see at the bottom here, 8192, your standard size 8K map. I decided where would my grid sit overall that would best fit me, and then you can see where I've marked off areas where the bridges will go. But the next step was to get this into the game. So how do I know, like, what the coordinates are for that city tile? And it was like, I need a system to be able to accurately draw in one that transfers like to the same spot exactly in the other, or to build something in the game knowing where it is on the map. So if we zoom in far enough, And this is where it gets back to the old Slaanhatten style maps. So we've basically got the coordinates all the way up and all the way across. Now, I could do this for the whole thing. I could just make an Excel sheet. When it comes to sort of filling the prefabs XML out, now that I know the coordinates of every single one of those squares, or more importantly, can calculate them, I could, in theory, fill that entire grid with the new city tiles. And I'm kind of picturing like we're going to have a solid map of city that's going to just randomly generate some prefabs and parts and just seamlessly work. The only thing we would have to concern ourselves with would be the bridge pieces. So I was like, instead of putting all these little bits of highway around the map to start off with, we're going to have to think now what we're going to have. So the idea is I don't know, we'll put an airport on one of the islands. We'll go Grand Theft Auto style. That's going to need a bridge. This island will be, I don't know, a bit more dense city or skyscrapers and things like that. It might be an industrial, I don't know. But we want the main highway to end at the airport, come across here somehow, come across here and link this side, because it's like a freeway or a big multi sort of lane highway is built with a purpose to get from A to B. So just the random sort of shit all over the place doesn't kind of work. And I like the nitrogen sort of take on it, where you just get the cross, but again, it's very basic. It's not very real. And the more I thought of it, I thought if I get me highway pieces onto these 150 tiles, one, we can utilise the port system for decorations on the highway itself, so we can have a fancily designed road with all the markings, street lights and that, but randomise across these tiles that are going to run right across the map. Because I'm thinking initially, if you could picture the sections with coordinates in, so these little black filler dots would be highway. We're going to have the highway run all the way down. We're going to have a nice coastline for dock areas, ships. The open sewer could open out onto here. I haven't really decided how we're going to do that yet, but again, if we stick it all in these 150 tiles, it doesn't matter where we build, everything's going to be working relative to each other because they're all in this grid that's calculated perfectly. And the joy of the system is a lot of that 150 tile could be empty. There's going to be like sections of highway in between a couple of hubs where it's just going to be the road. There's not going to be a lot there. And then if it's terrain filler, it'll still pick up the trees, the decorations, things like that, and we can still spawn prefabs and ports or whatever on there. We can start to see things like truck stops appearing at junctions on a highway where they would actually appear, you know, not just randomly placed into a city next to no main roads. And it's going to look a lot more organic. It's going to be a lot more work and effort, but you know, there's some things that we can't have random, and I'm quite happy to let these random lots pick me prefabs at this point, and then we can have a map of instant content with just the highway in and play on it straight away and build on it over time. Because I think that's the main thing we need to get away from with Slaanhatten, is getting more versions of it out that are good enough for people to test and actually use. So, like I say, there's nothing set in stone as of yet, but I've got some very good examples to show you now. So with this in mind, and the idea that we're going to initially have a highway that's going to connect every one of our hubs, how do we connect the hubs to the highway, which was the next sort of stepping stone. And for that, we're going to go back into the game. I mean, fuck's sake, 20 minutes and we haven't even looked at a prefab. I'll timestamp some of this shit out just so that you can get straight into the dirty stuff. So we're going to go into the prefab editor and we'll take a look at the first few tiles that I've designed. So the new highway is now going to be the freeway, because they now call their highway a 10-meter wide road. So that's now highway. I needed a new word, and I also needed a new group in the editor to dump all these in, because some of mine are getting a bit overused now. And this is taking its time. What the hell did I log out designing? Oh. Right, so before we look at this one, let's just go to the new group, which is tiles 150. Now, I'll release this pack fairly soon, so you can at least have these sample things that I'm making now, because they will serve as good templates. So we've got the initial base. We're going to build a lot of things on 150 meter tiles, so it just made sense to have a starting point, create a new prefab, drop this in the middle, save it, give it a name, reload it, boom. There's your playing ground for the next prefab. Now, initially, we've done this, and then somehow I updated the imposter and accepted some save changes, and it kind of decided to keep the imposter. So this was my first stab at how would I bring the bridge into this 150 meter grid and like mess around with what could we do underground and shit. I've got a few Twitch videos where I'm actually building all this live and I talk a lot about it, so rather than yap on a bit more, we'll show you some new stuff, which I think is this one. So this is my first stab at a cross section, and don't be deceived. It's called a cross section because it's designed to have these tiles attached on all four sides. Now, we don't know the system that they're using to connect all of these, so I've gone on the assumption of 10 meter wide road. It might be an 11 meter wide road, it might be 7 or whatever. There might be something else, they might not be joined by road. It just depends. But the point is, as we'll see, just one tile rotated around in a grid creates this fucking crazy just roadmap. And this wasn't built with a particular design in mind. I've got no markings or anything down. You know, we've got the shapes that they kind of cut out for the parking areas and things like that, but until I know how they're doing the markings and what the roads are made out of, it's pointless really going to town on these. The next thing I've done was build a couple of prefabs that are the sizes of the lots that I was going to use. So they confirmed 25 by 25 are mainly going to be buildings that look like they're going to fit against sidewalks. So this is just so we can visually use up the space and see what it's going to look like, see how much we can fit on there, where would roads and stuff have to go. So, you know, I put a basic, quite clearly not a cross-section, but as explained, a cross-section prefab. Put it together just so I could pilot in the world editor just to show you how the system I think is going to work. And you've got to remember, on top of these parts here, these prefab spawners, sorry, there's, you know, we have the ability to make a part that says in one version of this tile, that's a car park. In the next version of the tile, it's where there was an explosion and it's a crater. Or in their example, there's a hole and there's a digger like laying some pipes. It's going to give a variety, and we'll get a lot of mileage out of single pieces like this. So if they're going to ship the Alpha 20 with, I don't know, 100 plus of these tiles, I mean, like, the full map that you have just seen isn't such an ambitious idea, I don't think. I'm not sure. So this was my first demo tile, shall we say, just so we can visualize in the editor over a bigger area kind of how we're going to use it. So with what I said about the freeway, in mind, I had to come up with a tile that I could use for just basic road, but then we're also going to have to consider when that runs in between two of these city blocks, how would we link these together? So we're going to have sections of highway that are just designed to be sitting out in the middle of nowhere. We'll have sections of highway that utilise similar shapes. So it'll connect the highway on either side, but it'll also have those 10 metre connections which will take us from the highway into the road, into the hubs themselves. So I don't think I'm doing the best job in the world of explaining it. But if we look at the prefabs themselves and then I show you what's in the world, you'll see exactly what I mean. So the first freeway tile. Now, I've got an odd number of blocks here. The tiles themselves are 150, which cuts in half down the middle perfect. But in this centre section, you know, I needed that extra row just to make the odd number kind of work. So this is offset by one block. So the highway itself, it's only going to fit nicely and neatly. Like, we couldn't rotate this and just stick it on the other end. This side will always have to connect to that side. So, you know, it doesn't matter what way we rotate it. How we place this in the world is actually going to you'll see in a second anyway. But this was the first section of just a straight highway. Now, this could be out in the middle of nowhere. It's very few blocks. It's mostly terrain filler. It'll look good in the distance, and it'll give all the fancy road markings. That could be a little road coming off with a gas station or fast food, or like I said before, like a truck stop or something like that, and put them into positions where they would actually be in the real world, which will add to the overall immersion as well. This was an example tile of how we would get people off the highway and into a hub. So in the example that they gave during episode 6 of the dev stream, they have a city tile with the trader on, which looks like it's just a straight section. One side is gonna join into the rest of the city tiles that make up that particular hub. The other side is going to have this little marker that's going to tell it to join to the actual random roads. And that's how they're going to link these hubs in these big areas to the road grid and the splat tree itself. Now, we don't need to do that. If we're clever and we lay this highway down around all the areas, then little prefabs like this will be where the trader city tile goes now. And instead of a marker connecting to a random road, it's just going to connect to another road that fits and is going to have all the markings and things like that. But then we also have a way to sort of, that's a bit more eye-catching. I love making bridges. All these new shapes and textures and stuff like that. It's going to add a hint of real without looking super real. But I mean, like, their titles look absolutely amazing. So once we get some copy-paste and we rob some ideas, I don't think it's going to take us long to start delivering things into the game via the world editor that you just cannot get in random gen and are really, really visually really good. I think full custom maps are going to be a big, big deal come Alpha 20, because with those city tiles generating all the prefabs, you just save so much work. And then what was the last one? Right, okay. So this was my first city tile of how would we bring the bridge into the highway, because my main big double red bridge is going to be the main freeway bridge. I think single lane bridges we'll make different versions of, kind of like what I've done over the highway section you've just seen. But again, this tile would connect to the bridge on that side, the highway system on that side, but we're going to have the 10-metre connectors on either side on the north and south, so that we could have city tiles on either sides of this. And this could actually be in the middle of it. Wait, it's actually going to be just next to the river's edge. The highway is going to run off and cut through, and then the highway is going to fuck off into the distance and go to the other hubs, and we'll branch the city tiles themselves off the overpass and things that I showed. So yeah, there's a bit of work to go, but I mean, like, the foundation and the building blocks are all there, and that's what it feels like now. Instead of building the Lego from scratch so that you can play with the Lego, we're just playing with the Lego now. So people will be able to produce what was taking me weeks in a few days, just because the system is going to be in place for them to just throw down ready-made, filled, content-packed and slightly random cities. I'm really, really excited for it. So that's the 5 main prefabs, I think. 2 city tiles, 3 sections of highway. We're at 33 minutes, so we'll have a few minutes of just running around and we'll look in the world editor. And like I say, sorry for rambling on loads at the beginning. We'll timestamp straight to these things in the description for you. So the aptly named Alpha 20 Prep. And it looks good. It does look good. So while this is loading, if we quickly switch back to paint, no, I'm sorry, and we'll get rid of this background and I zoom in, I actually drew 2 of those grid squares onto a splat tree that I've thrown into the world. So what it meant for me is wherever these appeared on the map gave me the grid coordinates to that particular square, and then knowing the size of every tile just allowed us to calculate everything else. So if you're wondering how I measured things up and got things literally pinpoint precise, and if you're going to take ownership of every single block between a space, you need to fucking know this shit. You do not want to be finding out 50, 60 hours into your project and your map that all of a sudden, like, one of your city blocks is like too big this way and too big that way, and things that you've put down on top of that, all of a sudden everything needs to shuffle. And it's much easier to just like, okay, I'm going to put this down, let's check the map, what should the coordinates for this block be? Ooh, I'm out by 1, why is that? Fuck, the prefab's too big. So like I've said at the very beginning, having a plan and being prepared is essential if you're going to take on this kind of stuff. Now let us just find my cursor. So we've got the 3 freeway or 1 sections, we've got the single overpass, we've got the bridge section, and then we've got the same tile placed down 4 times. So we've got an example of how I would picture my highway looking. That's going to be separate from the whole system. This is going to be my little system done their way. That'll get the initial highway down on the map. And then whenever we've got a hub, and it's not always going to be this particular prefab, this is just the example, we can use this prefab and then just make another one and replace that line in the XML. That'll instantly change to whatever it was. It'll be designed to fit. There's no other work, like, you know, entailed in that. So when I say like a map full of instant content, I kind of mean it, you know, because once all of these are in place, it's just a case of updating those prefabs. You make 5 new city tiles, where do you want them to be, right? Let's just replace those lines in the XML. Oh, and that's the wrong button. So I haven't done the imposter on that bridge section yet. There's still a lot of things that can change with it, and it's actually the wrong way around. So yeah, the greatest example in the world. But if you can imagine, we'll use the individual bridge prefabs to build from there. We might have to make a custom section at the end so that everything kind of fits perfectly, because I've already pre-measured my prefab grid. So I've factored in all these sections of 150 meters, but the bridge is good the way it is, or the initial bridge is. But then the other thing is that it joins instantly at the highway, and I know this looks a bit shit. This is concept stuff, you know. I would make things exact right now, but it's not really super needed. So you can see we've got a gap. That might be me placing it wrong. I don't think I have. So that's, you know, something for us to instantly check. But then from this point, we hit the first sort of highway section. And again, you've just got a picture that we'll have parts and decorations, road markings. This will look like an actual 6-lane freeway. And then we've got a not so square, you know, slightly angled overpass off, and then a way for people to get out of the hub back on. And I just think little things like this is going to be so much better than just going out onto some flat, blank, empty road. They've done such a good job of the cities. We've got to kind of get the low blows in wherever we can, and outside of the hubs, the roads are going to look shit. That's just it. You know, they'll go over where we want them to go, and they'll do what they need to do. You know, I suppose it's one of the last pieces of the puzzle that they need to solve, really, for an almost perfect random gen now. But this will be how they come on, and then you can see straight away the road seamlessly fits. And then the thing that really got us through the videos is it was very hard to spot where one city tile ends and one begins, even though they could have potentially been riding over the same tile. They might not even have been rotated, just the variation in prefabs. But then using these sort of placeholders that I've made, you kind of get a feel for, this was 4 prefabs. 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's, what's that, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's 9 prefabs. So we've just placed 36 buildings in 10 minutes, you know. So it's not going to take like the old Slaanhatten releases. There's not going to be like months between releases. It's like, I am going to go hardcore at it and just get some big ass fucking dense map out there ready to fucking play on, and then just work on everything else over time. I think my biggest task at the minute is getting enough highway sections in so that we've got a bit of variety, because obviously once we get out into the desert and stuff like that, we might not see the made up concrete stuff. We might drop down to just lights every now and again on the middle and then use the metal road barriers and stuff like that. Again, we can adjust the decoration on the tiles on a tile by tile basis. And it's not going to be hard to just copy and paste this and make it a bit different or to change it to suit the purpose. And the more I see it, the more I'm just like, this is the way the highway should have been done. But just to quickly mention here, you'll see in the distant terrain, the other advantage of using this system is you can see there, that cutout section wants to be flat land because on the height map, that is flat land. Now, I know if we show the bounds, it's a second tab. So, I know that if we flip this over, and if we pretended that we're in paint.net, when I come down here and I get the coordinates for, 1191 west, 1062 north, and we switch back over here, that's like, wait there, if I bring this back. So there's the two sections. So that would be the bridge, first highway. So that's this tile here. Now, I haven't got my height map. Can I open that with paint.net and see if I can get it on there? Open with. There we go. And we'll just rotate that the right way. So what I'm actually going to have to do, I should load it as a layer, but if you can imagine, I'll not save this and we'll just draw a red square. When I make my layers visible, I'm going to see those two red squares. Now, I know that those coordinates are going to marry up to the coordinates that we see in the corner down here. So that's, like 968 by whatever. But it means that I can put something there. I can scoop that little road's worth of terrain out. So when we come back to the game, if we were to delete this prefab, we would just see the hole where that little cutout section is. And what it means is the game will use the terrain in the prefab itself and the concrete to draw the imposter, and it'll just look better. It means from a distance, we disable these again, you're going to see the shape of the bridge, but you'll also see the ramp down and the ramp back up on the other side, and there might be decorations down there that you'll be able to see as well. And like things like the square blocks underneath the rafters of the bridge and the supports. There's a few little bits of extra work that come with building this kind of prefab, but at the same time, for the look that you're going to achieve. And I think even considering that isn't really an actual building POI in there, we've just got the paths and the roads, I still think that's enough to go on to just be like, this is 100% definitely the best thing to happen to the world editor and prefabbing since the game came out, really. This makes my type of building and the types of things that I like to do so much easier. I'm going to save so much time, and that just means there's just going to be more people being able to produce the content. There's going to be more people fucking around with it and coming up with mad ways to use it. In 7 days in a year's time, I think is going to be a very interesting landscape, because this could be railroads, and that could be a station, or this could be a train station instead of an overpass that connects into the city tile system. And once all these prefabs are down, we might decide, well, actually, this row of prefabs we're going to replace with special train section city tiles that just have the tracks running through. We can build nice looking curves now. So, yeah, to say that the best is yet to come is just an understatement. I think the initial vanilla release is going to blow people's minds. I think things like this, a full map just using the vanilla prefabs, no highway or nothing, just making a fucking crammed map with reasonable terrain and stuff like that is going to be massively popular. So further down the line, when all the custom stuff starts making it in, I don't know, I mean, what's stopping the guys who make nitrogen, instead of spawning those little sections of prefab in, spawning these big sections in? It draws that initial highway out of these, and then it knows where it needs to be to connect the hubs. You know, if you have some kind of marker that knows that this prefab section has the connection on these sides, then what's stopping you going, okay, start putting your city tiles down from that point in? Yeah, yeah. Just think of the implications. Just think. Right, we're at 45 minutes. I've talked for far too long. I hope you can tell how excited I am. It's absolutely genuine excitement. I can't build fast enough. I can't get things into the game, just ideas out of my head fast enough. And the more I go back over the streams and the videos, the more I just start thinking about it. And so, like I say, I want to try and get my highway done so that come launch, I can just get the highway down and fill the area with cities and just have it all connect and look amazing, just to show off that it can be done and how fucking cool it's going to be. So just to finish, if you want to watch us and come and chat while I'm building live, Slaan TV on Twitch, links in the description. Twitch is a very empty, dry, dreary place at the minute where I spend mostly 4.5 hours talking to myself. I appreciate building is boring as fuck, but from what I've seen over the past 4 or 5 weeks, nobody else streams this kind of stuff. So if you want to come and get someone's opinion, you want to ask a question, I live in the editors, and map making is like my number one passion. I use 7 Days to Die to play some weird sort of version of SimCity that I get to play a zombie apocalypse game on when it's finished. So yeah, give us a follow over on Twitch. I don't have a set schedule, so a follow costs you nothing. It's just a little notification that'll let you know when I'm live. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share these videos. We need more people to see this sort of stuff so that we can get more people hooked on the idea that, oh my god, with minimal effort, people can really fucking have a good stab at making some cool shit and make it work with everything else. So that's me signing out for now. I'll see you again soon. I'll see you on Twitch some point later on in the week, maybe it's over the weekend.